What does philosophy mean to an immortal? Welcome, dear listeners, to this morning's episode. And a very unique question has come. Okay. To dive into it, first of all, philosophy from Latin means the love of wisdom, philosophia. Now, I thought about philosophy being important to human beings because there's unknown variables. We don't know what's going to happen. We are temporary creatures, and so there is a lot of mystery left. Then I wondered, okay, let's say we had an immortal being, the first human being to become immortal. Okay, found the perfect song. So as I was saying, we are mortal beings. Philosophy has a value. We're trying to wonder about how to live. We're trying to wonder about what the dimensions of existence are. And if we were an immortal being, that would all of it would change. Even a lot of philosophers who share their philosophies and they pass away and we don't know what happens. Sorry, not that we don't know, the philosopher doesn't know. That means Socrates would have no idea that, he would be quoted in 2020. For the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing. I wrote a script called The Immortal Philosopher. And this script started with a philosopher sharing the consequences of what happens after his philosophy is shared. At the end of the script, the camera moves to a point where you see this immortal philosopher has been speaking through humanity, through a human lens, only to realize at the end he has no face and his face is a machine, If we become immortal, the unknown variables go away. Philosophy cannot exist. That means imagine all the people on this planet all the wars that have been fought, and how in the 2 world wars, I believe the count was about 85 million people. Can you just imagine? I thought about, what if all the people in history didn't die? All the prophets, all the dictators, all the kinds of people there are on this planet. What if they never died? I mean, even though the population would be ridiculous, but what would it imply ideologically? And you know what it would imply? It would imply, in a sense, that there is no point fighting over truth. That means if people tried to kill each other over truth, and they couldn't, literally they wouldn't die, they were immortal beings, you know, then the philosophy wouldn't be important anymore. Think of yourself as an immortal person, as if someone passing through the test of time. Throughout the eons of your endless existence, how many times would your search for wisdom change? Like, you would go through trillions of philosophies, you know, you'd see different ways that creaturehood has emerged and whatnot, you know. So if we were immortal, we might hate wisdom. That was kind of my point with the subtitle. That means we're mortal, and philosophy means the love of wisdom, something that accompanies us in our existential, you can say, dilemma, you know. But if that existential dilemma is gone, and being immortal is strange. If you're being in a singular dimension, immortality is a cool idea. If you're a multi-dimensional being, immortality of one dimension is a narrowing down of your being. Now think of this idea of immortality being accessed in different ways. Imagine a sort of mythological sense. There was a fountain of youth, and this fountain of youth, poetically in the future, in a sci-fi version, might be like this energy drink. I called it in my science fiction immortal juice. Another sort of immortality could in some sense be through cyberspace, an immortal condition where the body cannot move, a sort of immortality that if the body moves, it becomes mortal, but if it doesn't move and it's in a status, it becomes immortal. So imagine in the future there's a technology that allows people, let's say somebody doesn't like being alive in 2020, they go into a pod. It's pretty sci-fi, but imagine they go into a pod and their brain connects to the cyberspace realm. When their brain connects to the cyberspace, their body is aging very slowly, you know? Or imagine we have people who go into the atmosphere and they are in these pods and they're kind of like sleeping in these pods, but in their brain is involved with cyberspace. Can you imagine like this strange thing occurring in the future where in our atmosphere there's tons of giant, you can say rectangular capsules, rectangular kind of looking ships, imagine, where there's people in them, and so they are simulating life on Earth, but it is through a cyberspace replica based on the live streaming through the eyes of those people actually on Earth. That means if you have one camera in a real world you can use that camera's information to create endless cyberspace world. So pretty much through mythology, there was a way to immortality. Through cyberspace, there's a way to immortality. You know, through our food or drink or whatnot, which was kind of connected to the myth one. But there could be an immortality where our consciousness is transferred into a machine. Like right now, all of our pain and suffering and hope for the future is because we're biological beings. We are mortal and biological. If we could somehow, let's say somehow, it's highly improbable, but let's say somehow we were able to properly transfer consciousness to a point where it was like, very poetically, we found a way to put the soul into a machine, you know? So there could be a transference of just generally the mind doesn't have a biological interface, you know? The mind is like positioned in, you know, a machine pretty much, you know? So a machine mind could be immortal. It could be in the sense that people start changing their body parts. Let's say in the future, people start walking around in the street with robot arms. And eventually the person changes their arms, or like, you know, imagine you seeing someone who has robot arms, and imagine the kids of the future generations being like, I want a robot arm, and eventually the person that gets through into the consumerist view to a degree where they become machine, imagine, right? Of course, this is a future idea I'm sharing, but what I'm saying is that imagine replacing your biology for a machine and end up being a robot that's behaving like human, and then being like, what's the point of the meaning of life? Right? In the moment we stop being biological, we have succeeded. The moment we create AI and we create a technology that can just expand the universe and leave its mark, and the moment we become machines, we have succeeded. There's no failure as a machine. You know, that means our backup system as biological creatures are like, oh my God, our biology couldn't continue existentially, so our existence now depends on the non-biological. So I'm saying there could be a transition from biological mortality into mechanical immortality, but still so many mysteries on the way that need to be revealed. Pretty much my idea is that whatever you have an abundance of, you downplay in the subconscious, I feel. Right? That means it's like that moment you see it in films even, or or in just real life, moments where the person doesn't realize who's there with them until the person leaves. That means something you have, you don't think about, you're not worried about losing, you're thinking about having other things, let's say the common man. Now, immortal is very different than eternal, these two words. Immortal is conditional. It's as if eternity on the level of, as a counter to the mortality. But I would say eternity has to do with a transcendence of time, or the concept of time changing, you know? I feel if we were a society, let's say we were 8 billion immortal creatures, we couldn't die, right? What would we do as biology? Like, that's the thing about life, that it's because it's this giant landscape, and we appear on a rock in the middle of nowhere, it's as if the biology wasn't temporary, it'd be even more disturbing, right? So there is something here that the meaning of life, in accordance to its type of continuity and its continuity, loses its meaning. That means it's hilarious. If a person, let's say a person, this is just for metaphor's sake, let's say a person opens their eyes in this world and then they suddenly close it. The person got to see 1 second of being on Earth. And imagine a person got to see like so much time on Earth, right? The longer the time, the more the person has to keep balance. That means the more the idea is tested. And it's hilarious. It's like this idea that on a long enough time span, everything dies. You know? Everything changes. That means pretty much human beings are destined to literally, excuse me if this is not discreet, but to have literally sex all over the universe. Like, that's the biological, mortal kind of agenda of our species, right? Pretty much to reproduce and conquer, expand the kingdom of the eyes of the intelligence of mankind. That means there is, for example, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, and then the animal kingdom, right? And I split the animal kingdom personally into inferior species and superior species. And the superior species is us. We have something no other animal does, you know? That means it's we're a very unique deployment of evolutionary phenomena on the surface of the Earth. I feel that in any plane of existence where the unknown is forgotten or is about to be forgotten, the last rebellion of the philosophers comes. That means philosophers in our modern world have been reduced to people who, in some sense, are just trying to keep the past alive. I would say it's very modern philosophy is kind of super slow, you know? So much of life has to do with this relationship of the known and the unknown. I mean, when a person considers it, I mean, imagine you were born on another planet in another galaxy. Do you know, whatever the circumstance, when creaturehood emerges, it's known small individual in giant unknown space. And so the world is designed to be superior than us. That means when it comes to intelligence and space is the elder of matter. So how mystics respect their elders is by remembering how they were the universe, how they were a universal activity prior to the game of words in worlds. You can say in the past, philosophers were just people who were just like, what is all this? What is this? What am I? Why am I here? Pretty much like freak out questions, like as if the first philosophers suddenly noticed how much we don't know, and that's how philosophy was born. And I would say, why is philosophy the most important, not one of the important, higher than philosophy, I would say, is the language, the study of language. That means language, to me right now, it's not being treated that way, but it's the most important field in academia. It is the most important, and there's so much dimensions and still unknown factors to it, you know? That means it's just phenomenal that particles are moving, and the movement of these particles are making the object become a subject to itself. It's just like the most beautiful symphony, but it's a visual existential symphony, you know. I feel it could be like a sine wave. It could be that we're mortal now, so philosophy is very beautiful. It could be that when you are immortal, philosophy is the most irritating thing. You know, it could be that a robot doesn't care for philosophy. You know, a robot doesn't need to ask questions. Just implement program till the day you die. Like that's pretty much you can say a robotic life. I feel there needs to be a resurfacing of authentic wonder in the world. I don't know how this is going to happen, but the clue I've got is that a question will come from within for every human being. Most people want answers, you can say. I could even say personally there was a point in my life where answers were more interesting than questions. That means the question was kind of like an emotion and the answer was like some technical, yeah, I like this kind of answer, you know? But it took me a while to realize that all the concepts and everything that the brain has stored and recorded like a camera from the beginning of the life till now, it is just connecting random dots. That means when we say a person is a bundle of thoughts, like I've heard some people say that, you know, it's like the person's like, what am I? Who am I? You're a bundle of thoughts. Now go back to sleep. You know? So it's when a bundle of thoughts is meaningless. Behind our eyes, we can instantly shift selfhood. And by doing so, worldhood changes, and that's how we remember. When a person says they remember something, what is happening is they're remembering a moment that they had existed in. You know, and because it's direct and experiential, it goes into the long-term memory. This is the secret, by the way, to anybody, like the educational system's pretty like, I would say just a little better than what the Pharaoh was doing in Egypt. Anything that is a journey is easily remembered. And if a person wonders about anything they learn, anything that is new, if they connected to the journey of their presence in the moment, not only the person remembers everything, but after some point, a modality activates in the human being. This is so new, so right now people don't know how to respond to it. But what it is, and there's a bunch of people who've suggested this, behind your eyes, in the invisible room where memories, visualization, and the mask of thought is worn or found, where the masks of thought are found. The discrimination between what is existing and what is experiencing, and how conditional and unconditional the existence is, and how unconditional and conditional the experience is. Right now, as I'm speaking, I am an observer, and my own biological existence, everything, the room, the computer, the headphones on my head, everything that is physical, it exists. But now check this out. Even though right now I'm sitting on a chair, my hand is not touching the ceiling, the ceiling of the room. So in some sense, I can see the ceiling of the room. It's as if the eyes can see it. But in regards to the other senses, it's not active. So what it feels is like we are like a keyboard. Imagine we're like 5 piano keys, and every experience we have in existence is a certain way these keys are being played. It's as if the world is playing us as an instrument for itself. We don't realize it, but I feel it could be that, like, if an advanced extraterrestrial civilization in the future came here, and they were like through a subtler, like an invisible dimension watching us, they would just see artwork. That's what randomity does in a declared, ordered system. That means you can think of it that there's such a thing as creativity, or you can think of it that there is chaos, order, chaos, order, chaos, order. Like you can say a creative person is that they saw chaos and they found an ordered structure to be there, right? And you can even see there's a type of creativity and destruction. And it's not something that goes with our moral code as a species, but I will tell you, this was one of those hard things for me to accept, but it is the truth of the matter. There is as much beauty in the order taking place at the same time as the order leaving. But it's all about the performance of the energy that is being expressed in the moment. The observer is unknown. The observed is known. When we wonder, how do we know, like let's say a person touches a table, right? They're like, I touched this table, it's physical, you know? They're like, see, I imagine a person like slams a table and breaks it like a shaman monk, right? You know, just to see if the table's real. The person's like, okay, I'm touching the table, I can feel it, my hand can feel it, you know? But how do you know you're touching the table? And then the question goes deeper. How do you know what a table is? How do you know what you are? And we have built a civilization that fears to ask these questions. We have made a civilization that fears the why question. The why question is the most, I would say, after I, the letter I, the letter Y is the most divine letter. Metaphorically, I was sharing this with my own father, and personally, my father sees this planet as a school. Like my father sees this world as an educational planet, you know. And for me, I don't see it per se as an educational planet. I see it as an airport. It has a battlefield phase until it becomes an airport. It's like in the middle of a battlefield, we're trying to build an airport, you know? But I can tell you, I summarized this relationship in the way where, if we traditionally saw the body, mind, and soul, the body is in a battlefield. And that battlefield is being able to ride the waves of nature's laws. So the body is in a battlefield, the mind is in a school. Like, I will grant that the mind is in the school. That means when I look at the mind, it's just seeking experience. The body needs food, like the stomach needs needs food for digestion, and the brain needs senses to become a mind. So you can say the process of experiencing existence is simultaneous experiential learning. Like, experience is learning. When I wonder about my existence, it's conditional. If I don't eat food, if I don't attend to the physiological maintenance, then the existence fades. The body's existence fades. It doesn't mean the attention fades. I would say the attention, the mind. So here's the thing: the body is a battlefield, the mind is a school, and the soul is unknown. It doesn't play games anymore. The mind is designed to be an endless game, and the mind is in the field of the karma of the planet. That means that when a person wanted to free their mind, your mind is dependent on the body you have. The person wonders, why do I have a mind? Then they're like, oh yeah, to move my body. But if the person didn't have a body, then you can't even know you have a mind, and you can't even know you're not a mind. Right? So it is phenomenal that if this world, there's like 0.01% chance that it's multidimensional, we have not built a civilization adjusted to that. We have built a civilization where we're trying to fit all human beings into a nice, cozy story, and that can't be, It's like ideological Hunger Games would be a shame. And I feel that if we wondered, honestly, if we started to design an advanced civilization for an immortal being doesn't have a philosophy, It's like philosophies have the immortal being. There was a sentence in this YouTube channel, which I'm really fond of, called ERB. And in it, there was this battle, like this parody rap battle between Tesla and Edison, Nikola Tesla and Edison. And the people who made the video were like genius writers, right? There was a scene where Nikola Tesla's like hypothetically in this parody rap battling Edison, and he says to Edison, you stole something, you felt you stole something from me, but you stole me from mankind, right? That means there was this theme of Nikola Tesla trying to somehow create global power through his unique kind of like inventor search into the core meaning of things. And Edison seemed to get in his hair or something. They definitely were competing. Like, Edison was like tripping. He was like electrocuting elephants and cows for marketing value. He's like, yo guys, look at this. Look at my invention being incredibly cruel, but incredibly it works nice. Of course, both of them to me were great men. But like, compared to the I would say they were legends. Legends should be honored. But I'll tell you this: that sentence of Nikola Tesla saying, you thought you stole something from me, but you stole me from mankind. I suddenly felt every war Like the 85 million people who died in the world wars, every human being, it's as if they were stolen. Violence steals the potential of the civilization from itself. And so the era of the multidimensional cannot be violence. Violence is in one dimension. Violence is like in one view, yeah, this is it, you know. But I'll tell you, it is like in a multidimensional view, it's as if more like how Isaac Asimov said, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent, right? That means you see this person in the picture, I don't know who drew this artwork, but it's epic. The idea is that this is their last refuge. Do you know? That means if humanity could find a way to solve the situation without fighting, why go into the theatrics? That means I would say war is for the blind. It has to be. Because if one could see, they could solve the situation on a mind level. There's this very deep Vedic, you can say meditative practice, and it's like through an insight, it's not even a practice, wherein, I believe it was in the Ribu Gita, and I could be wrong, but it's in one of the Gitas, and of course there's many. I think Avadhuta Gita or Ribu Gita, in one of these two, where it says like, I believe it says the Janani, pretty much the realized being, lives in the world as if he doesn't exist. That means the mind has reached a point where, imagine your intelligence just simulated infinite ways of you being created, infinite ways of you being destroyed, infinite ways of you being recreated, infinite ways of you being destroyed. Eventually your mind is like, it has wings of an angel that its ends you cannot see. Do you see? It's like, that's what I'm like, after some point. I'm getting too excited over immortality. It's like, can you imagine like a young kid saw Santa, you know, which was obviously someone, you know, who's trying to keep the Christmas spirit alive, right? And the person went to Santa, or imagine that actual kid saw Santa, like the real Santa. And Santa's like, what do you want, kid? You know, and the kid's like, I want to be immortal, Santa. And Santa's like, all right. And Santa looks at an elf like, give the kid a toy car. The mortal can play, the mortal can fight, the mortal can create, the mortal can break, can destroy. But there is a unique value system that comes with mortality, that by just fathoming it, the reverse of it, immortality cannot render that joy, right? So there's a lot of human beings on this planet where they're like, all right, I'm a temporary being, I need to find some sort of eternal truth. What is this? You know, I gotta do something in this life, right? So when a human being goes towards eternity, I would say that unless they realize who is looking through their eyes, time is their master. That means, imagine time is like the nephew of the lords of karma. I'm trying to wonder, if I was immortal, probably fear would be obsolete. The word fear wouldn't exist. Love would probably exist, but love and novelty would probably become synonymous. That means anything that was new was like love for an immortal being that's seen endless patterns, you know? A being can give from themselves only so much. Then they reach a point where the universe has to share, you know? That means there's some people who they are working for, you can say, various companies and culture and society. And you can say there are people who they are working for the living realm. That means imagine the person seeing the idea of the ego, right? In a lot of schools of thought, traditionally, they're like, yo, you got an ego? Get out of here. It's like, no egos allowed in the temple. So what part of this don't people understand? You know, and people were like, yo, this guy's got an ego. But the thing is, the idea of self, due to its changing nature, is like clothing. Or is like shoes. It's as if every moment wears its own shoes. Immortality could mean pure information. It could mean inseparability of the individual and the collective, the evolution of the immortal. So we could think of ourselves, let's say, technically we are elementally immortal. It's just our constitution that gives us the human possibility to experience. So think of it this way, that every person is made of elements from the periodic table. The elements that constitute them can be found in the periodic table. The periodic table doesn't die. Do you know? It's as if people die, but the elements don't die, right? The elements reach a certain level of simplicity where then they, from that level of simplicity, they rebuild. Do you know? So technically our bodies don't die because our body was just a composition of elements that don't die, right? So technically we are immortal. Matter is immortal, you know, because energy is like its soul. It cannot be created or destroyed, yet it goes from form to form. I feel philosophy currently in 2020 for people is in the shadow of science. But when you go back in history, you will see science branched out of philosophy because philosophy was tackling the deepest questions in existence. You see, it's as if there are systems of thought that they look at a result of anything and they're like, okay, how is this not false? And there are systems of thought that look at it and they're like, how is this not true? You know? And I would say the scientific endeavor liked slamming the hammer down. And it's not that there's anything wrong. It's like every ideological system, whether it correlates directly to physical reality or not, is an artwork. You know, that means the wisest person who knows how to listen to language knows that this is all paint in the void. And really it's the eyes of the person looking at the artwork that suggests the value in the artwork. So you can say salvation for an immortal being would be creative expression. So imagine we were a kind of immortal, that we had one kind of body and not robotic, like somehow we became like a human being that was immortal. That means the biology never died and the person could just choose an age, right? And that means, imagine it was a technology and the person could literally, it was time travel mixed with this kind of technology, so the person could have a choice of being whatever age. So let's say you wanted to be 25 and you could be an immortal for like a 25-year-old version of yourself, immortal. You could be an 80-year-old man and still have access to the 25-year-old version, of your own immortality, imagine in the future. So, can you imagine the marketing for an immortal technology company? It's like, hey, why die? You know, it's like, yeah, aren't you tired of dying? Try immortal tech. Honestly, if there was a company that was selling immortal technology, it should be called Immortal Line, and it should have an immortal line of product. Endless line of products, but I'm just saying that it's just phenomenal how our temporary nature makes the unknown beautiful. And if we were not temporary, the unknown would be just prison bars. You know, many people who have the idea of reincarnation, I will tell you, there's a sort of theology also for a polytheology, I would say. I would say there are some people on this planet who are polytheologian. And I don't know how many people know this, but in India, they have this tradition where in even remote villages, every person has their own god. As if their people's relationship with God wasn't as a truth that can't be touched, it was as a truth generated in the image of the Creator, right? So in some sense, I could tell you, the earth has been the earth, man has just overlaid endless stories on top of it. An immortal being, think of it as if you're immortal. How many languages will you learn? How much would you just absorb? How much would you see? And what would happen to that brain? Like, this is what I want to know. Let's say you have a brain and every experience is a neural kind of firing, you know, an activity, like a neural thunderstorm. Right? So how, if a person was immortal and their brain could stay healthy forever, right? So what would endless thunderstorms of neural networking in eons do? That means that's one of those things we may never know as human beings. You know, we can only, you know, visualize till we realize. But I feel what's going to happen is that this is just the quality of the immortal. There is no value system. So life doesn't have meaning, but at the same time, because it doesn't have meaning, your own immortality doesn't have meaning. That means for an immortal being, there may be no such thing as personality. Like, think of an immortal being throughout history, like thousands of years. How many personalities is this immortal being gonna have? How many societies? How many cultures in these thousands and thousands of years and into the eons? Like, is this creature gonna fit into? Do you know what I mean? So we have built a civilization for mortal creatures. But if we start creating a civilization for immortal beings, because the ego is acting immortal, a person's ego can make them feel they are right when they're wrong. The deep philosophical, the deep esoteric notion I would say the deepest esoteric notion is that the truth of all moments is present in one moment. Those who instantly understand this were free before they were born. Those who don't instantly understand this are also free, were also free before they were born. It's all, at the end of the day, energy. That means a person can look at his sun like, what a beautiful sunset, at the same time being like, yo, that's a giant ball of gas, you know, it looks beautiful from a distance, you go up close, you burn. You know? Some things I would say, yeah, the person has to cultivate enjoying from a distance, you know. Or it could be that some things are beautiful from the distance. When you go up close, there's totally different dimensions of it. Like, think of it this way. Imagine a person, we say this person is a good person, you know, but we treat the person like a particle. And just like a particle has subatomic particles, we see this person that we thought was good is made of smaller particles that are good and bad and neutral. Just like we have the electron, proton, neutron, in the psychology, I can say, if we were to classify memory, there's memories that are positively charged. You know, it's like happiness all the way. And then memories that are negatively kind of have a sort of negative electromagnetic charge. You know, so literally I'm pretty much overlaying the atomic interpretation over the psychology, right? And I would say that now imagine the positive and the neutral are connected and there's electrons moving around it. So we can say that there is positivity and, how do I say this? Positivity and neutrality are connected. Negativity is circling around positivity and neutrality. So when a person becomes neutral, they are in some sense, or let me say it like this. The psychology of the person, there's moments where the person had no opinion. They were literally waiting at a bus stop. In that memory, there wasn't an ego, there wasn't a self, there wasn't suffering. There was just, imagine, for example, a person waiting, right? Now imagine a person falling down from a bike or something. You know, that's a memory where there was an intensity, right? So even though I'm saying like a positively charged subatomic particle or a negatively charged subatomic particle, right? So I would say when it comes to events, it would have to do with intensity, right? So it would be a negative event would be an intense event, right? A positive event would be an event where the person's feeling like freedom. And you know, we're living in a world where a lot of people are looking for freedom, but I don't know how many people wonder, what would you do after you find freedom? And I feel the person will only play. So you are either eternally playing or temporarily working in this realm. I feel this follows this a similar parallel to the martial artist, that in the battlefield he was like fighting 12 people at the same time, not getting tired, muscles relaxed, just incredible fighting rhythm, and the person in their inner realms was just like walking a garden, you know. But all the other warriors in the battlefield had egos, and I'm gonna conquer, I'm gonna get you, you know? Like, so there was a difference between how the inner realms were held, right? And I feel this is the most important thing a person can ask. You know, how are my eyes holding my world, right? And to even take it deeper, how is my attention holding the outer realms, and how is my attention being the inner realms? And the inner realms has an unconscious to the same point that the outer realms has an unconscious, you know. So what that means is there is things that we don't know about what we're observing, and there are unknown also factors to the observer. Mysticism tackled the observer issue experientially and with a very unique technique. And I would say science tackled the outer rubbish. All of these are tools. That means if a person just for a moment treats themselves like a person in the movie Castaway, stranded on an island, but this island is galactic level. Literally, we're on a rock, and instead of water being around us like an island, there's empty space around us. You know? So we are on a celestial island. Now, if we were on the celestial island, the attention would in some sense be like, okay, what do I do to survive? But now the survival view is coming towards collective, right? So I would say any human being who has naturally just thought about the survival of a global system, the survival, and when I say global system, I'm not talking about again, the Lord of the Rings thing of ideological institutions. A mortal philosopher would feel like an artist. An immortal philosopher would feel like the world is an endless artwork. And honestly, anything the person concentrates on consciously becomes art. Like when a person goes to an art gallery and they're like, I saw some beautiful art. It's like literally the person just zoomed in on matter, you know? You know, that means you can zoom in on anything. And you can after a while be like, yo, so much creativity in that, you know? But a creativity that doesn't find the new has mistitled itself. I would say that as well. What will happen to philosophy, let's say 200 years from now? Realistically though, not immortal philosopher like. Realistically, what's going to happen to philosophy is that it's probably going to be one of the first branches of academia that bows to language. The moment philosophers suddenly find a reverence in language, the mystery of how this creature is using language and how attention is involved and how attention has to do with the presence of nature and how the presence of nature has to do with how the attention moves. Literally like Lord of the Rings, like at the end scene where the king is like, looks at the hobbits and that are about to bow down to him, and he looks at the hobbits and it's like, you guys don't bow down to anybody, you guys save the world, you know? You know? I mean, he doesn't say it like that, but he says something like, you, my friends, don't bow. And the king bows, and everybody in the kingdom bows to these four hobbits who are like, yo, where are we? Yo, these four hobbits were like, yo, they gave us so many rewards, but they didn't give us shoes, these assholes. Oh, man. But in that scene where they all bowed down to that one great value, I would say all academic fields would suddenly bow, and philosophy the king of academia, you know. It's the philosophy is the trunk, or I would say it like this, philosophy is the trunk, all other branches of knowledge are just branches, and the roots are language, and its mystery surpassed. That means I would say the philosopher king bowed to the mystery of the language explorers. Language is the program, is programming us. Literally, people walking outside, literally their inner realms can be translated to a sentence. Philosophy would return, again, through a long enough time span, it would return back to the first questions. So imagine there were these giant questions at the beginning of just human beings developing, and then these questions, like a mirror, broke and shattered into pieces. Each piece still reflects the question, but it's a piece of the question, you know. It's as if every human being is a piece of a puzzle for the future we still don't understand yet. An immortal being can also get tired of movement. So if philosophy requires movement, you can say a being that's immortal for eons, let's say you're a being that immortally just walk over the whole universe, you travel everywhere, right? So after some point you'll be like, okay, like how many new universal sectors can I see? You know, after some point you would just sit down and be. Right? So it's this hilarious thing where we move, and even if we could move infinitely, we'd eventually want to experience being. And then we would be for eons, just be energy prior to format. Life format. It's like when a human being notices there being the universe in one moment, what greater connection with nature can you have? Honestly, thoughts are like codes on a matrix computer screen. Or I would say, if for us human beings, it would be inner films. Now, if the inner film is consciously moved, the moment usually this happens is when the body moves, or some experience begins being activated as some sort of activity. But let's say you were a person who sprinted, then suddenly sat down. Your inner realms would be totally differently adjusted. Let's say there was some technology that allowed a human being, let's say a human being in a park or in a vast field, suddenly started sprinting. This human being started sprinting, then suddenly activated this button, and there was some sort of anti-gravity field surrounding this person, right? And so this anti-gravity field made the person sprint, then hover in the air. Do you know? Imagine there was technology in the future, we had not only understood gravity, not only found proper equations to it, but we had mastered it. Mastery means we have seen so many ways of its possibility where our choice is endless. An immortal being will eventually outgrow being an object, subject, and language. That means it's strange that we are like in a room that we can't get past beyond unless we get tired of the room. And I'm saying this in a mystical way. Language is the tip of the iceberg, and we have centered our lives around it. When our species treats language as a technology, there will be a massive global liberation. Literally, human beings will realize their definition is not based on just how ideas have been accepted to be the world. Emotions will become meaningless for the immortal. That means immortality is literally being nothing. Because you can be everything, there's nothing left to be. That means the being stops being. And if this plane of existence is one room of this mansion, and guys, even though I say statements, I mean, take into view, I'm just one person in a universe of a billion trillion stars talking. The grand mystery of this world surpasses anything anyone can say. At best, we can report our findings to the global tribe, you know, an advanced communication somehow, but you know, it's like our mind is a tag between the world and self. When the child is born, the world is like, all right, you're it. And the self is like, just running around, right? But at the end of the life, I feel like I feel like I'm probably going to write a dedicated chapter in my science fiction to this. A parallel universe where human beings, there was no idea of death. There was just, when the person was about to leave their body, right? The person would in some sense just a sort of, let's say, salute, but the salute is pretty much the index finger and the hand of the person, like a flat hand of the person. It just the index finger pointed to the, where the, between the eyebrows and a bit above. Anyways, the person would just honor the realm and be like, all right, world, blessings. And then they and they would touch the earth, and then they would return home, or they will pilot on. That means a grace where it's as if the concept of death doesn't exist. It's just that attention piloted out of elemental form into an unknown potential. So I need a quick intermission, guys. I'll be back in 5 minutes. So stay tuned if you like. If not, thanks for listening so far. Okay, I'm back. um, uh, Thanks for whoever waited. I was thinking of immortality rendering behavioral psychology void, and energy reaching a point where there is no point to it being a point. Both self-discovery and world discovery hold discovering your attention in a new way, so attention is the common denominator. Now, where the edge of the attention of the person is, and what would immortality for a disembodied mind be like? That means the body, the lifetime was like a momentum. It was like a speed, and the body got us to being a recognition that we're a mind. The mind is a universal event. The body is a planetary event. So brain is a planetary antenna, and a philosopher that wonders about the universe receives a universal signal. On some level, we can say all beliefs on reality are beliefs on color and image and depth and outline, like the shape. It's as if we're taking the artwork of nature and drawing our own artwork over it and feeling our own artwork is nature. Sometimes the world astonishes the person. This person asked this yogi, imagine this situation. The person asked the yogi, what do you eat? Like, are you vegetarian? The person says, do you eat meat? The yogi's like, no. The person's not a carnivore, right? And then the person's like to the yogi, so does that mean you're a vegetarian? And the person's like, no, I'm not a vegetarian either. And then the person's like, what does that mean? Are you a vegan? And the person's like, no, I'm not a vegan. And the person's like, what do you eat, man? And the yogi turns around and says, sunlight and air. You know, I'm saying this because there were certain yogis who would just look at the sun, but they would also do this very unique yoga and devotional practice before just looking at the sun, and it would just energize them somehow. But it's not advised to do this because then it's like you're gonna cry in daylight. The person asks the yogi, what do you eat? Like, are you vegetarian? The person says, do you eat meat? The yogi's like, no. You know, the person's not a carnivore, right? And then the person's like to the yogi, so does that mean you're a vegetarian? And the person's like, no, I'm not a vegetarian either. And then the person's like, what does that mean? Are you a vegan? And the person's like, no, I'm not a vegan. And the person's like, what do you eat, man? Okay. Guys, to bring this talk to fruition, to be honest, I'm gonna share a few last things and end it off. What does philosophy mean to an immortal? The whole inspiration of the talk was pretty much like when I think about mortal life, it's like a candle that's temporary, so its conclusion comes to serving the collective vision after it's done serving itself. But when I think about an immortal being, and if we were to design a civilization for immortal beings, and how the civilization would look like, it would be so skill-centered. Because you see, an immortal being could get bored of universal activity, but it may not get bored of what it could do. That means the variations, like in chess, there's endless ways to kind of live. Like the immortal has no lack of information. Immortality is kind of like being informed. Forever, you know. So this notion of building a civilization for immortality, when just the view of the advanced civilization is the civilization is so advanced it can do everything, and that's the whole motivation of the species. A temporary being. Life becomes a performance, and the stage you're on stage the moment you started existing. For an immortal being, if in the future, maybe now this idea is like, people are like, okay, whatever, but in the future, this may be a possibility that we have to find a resolution to psychology no longer being, for example, dialogue adjusted, but being self-experience generating adjusted. That means it's as if immortality is to feel like a god to one dimension, or in one dimension. The wonder of the known and unknown stands where we do. And as Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, he says two very powerful quotes. First he says, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves. As if he is no longer just a human being, he's oscillating between the dimension of dualistic human form and singular being. So it's as if he's oscillating between the truth of the self and the truth of the world. That means the truth of the self, you can say, is emptiness. Or let me say it like this, the truth of the self is evolution. The truth of the world is love. This love is kind of like remembering our future collectively in a way where it's as if our future is not in linear time. whether we're caught in mortal theatrics or immortal dullness. The philosopher is the seeker of the unknown, or the conceiver of the unknown. The mystic is the experiencer of the unknown. And so what does philosophy mean to an immortal? It means, what's the next change? That means this universe is moving, and reality is like imagination. The person that didn't have to imagine. It's like in front of our eyes, we're seeking for truth like an object. Behind our eyes, the subject in consciousness is the content of truth. This is something I've done throughout my whole life, where I have scanned the nature of not just people, also moments. And when it comes to people, it's like, how does that attention move in the space-time continuum? And I would say a massive amount of the population doesn't notice its movements beyond the story it's trying to stay in or succeed in. That means we have created a civilization where success has been defined as repetition. Rather than innovation. That means it's as if like the only educational system that works is an educational system that teaches the future, but because we don't know what the future is, we cannot teach anything about the future, and to teach about the past would be to occupy that space where the innovation for the future needs to be. So all that renders the student in the future is as an explorer. So technically an immortal is an student of one world, even though that world is endless. So you can say immortality is horizontal, at the horizontal maxing out of continuity, and eternity is the vertical maxing out of continuity. That means they asked some people, like, what is truth? And they're like, hey man, what truth? It's empty. Some people, they ask them, what is truth? They're like, truth is you. You are filling up this emptiness. And it's as if the person being like, how do I know what I know is knowing? In the inner realms, it's instant. It's as if our minds are living a faster life than our bodies. That's why they can come up with multiple probabilities at the same time. I feel literally we're like a memory trying to escape repetition. It's as if like, why, sometimes this is the phenomenal thing about nature. It's like, what reason can we give to a self-replicating gene? Can we say the self-replicating gene is doing this to survive? No, the self-replicating gene has no concept. It is just what it is. You know, when it comes to the outer realms, I kind of agree with Jean-Paul Sartre, this French philosopher who saw that there was no sort of depth and surface. You know, in a lot of mystical thought or metaphysical thought, there is a surface level of things, and then there is the other level. Like, that's pretty much the definition of metaphysics. There's physics, and then after you've seen the physics, what else could be? And this is where theoretical physics is literally like equivalent until proven. Equivalent to the New Age community until it is proven. Do you see? It's as if like reality is a sculpture. I would say anyone who decides to be an explorer of not their nation, but an explorer of their universal sector, and you know, we see a trend. We see a trend in history where the inner realms of the human being was silent. The caveman didn't have language. The caveman, like when it saw a boulder fall on another caveman, would just say, it would just make noise. But then eventually it became so sophisticated, this sculpture, that the inner realm began being in some sense through art, where there were handprints on cave walls. And then eventually it moved and evolved to a point where we were literally translating the inner film into words. Now we have found a way where it's like film directors, they translate that inner film into an actual outer film to the best they can. You know? Filmmaking is actually a very multidimensional art form. So more and more the inner realms have become expressed. Cyberspace would be the ultimate artwork of our species. It would be an artwork where we can live like gods in. It would be artwork on a god level. What I mean by that is in like how in video games they have that idea. It's as if it would be a god level. It would literally be an artwork where we can experience a sort of ultimatum of power in a sort of circumstance. So the inner realms are being shared more. Now what's going to happen? This inside outing of the psyche it's as if not only the precision based on the vocabulary of the species, just the knowledge base of the species, eventually the inner realms will become like the outer realms, and the outer realms will become like the inner realms. They will switch around. We feel we're bodies and our mind is in our body. We're gonna feel like minds where the body is in, or mind fields, you know. nature really doesn't categorize itself. You know, the truth of nature is like now. That's the only truth of nature. Now it's happened. Now revelation is like every changing phenomena in this realm. Everything is revealing what sort of intelligence is active in the realm. And so, even though I talked a lot about immortality, it is in some sense ignorance. It is also equivalent to a yogi using a CD which should not be ignited from a known intent. That means some power, it's like the person has control over it, they can share that power. But there's some power, in a mystical context, I would say, where the power comes on its own. It's unknown. It's the unknown moving the known. It's kind of like the logos that move the pen of every philosopher. There's the story of Alexander the Great. He's seeking the fountain of youth. He's conquered everything, but he's realized he can't conquer time. He calls whoever's there around him in his service, and he says, "Find me the fountain of youth, ASAP." You know, and everybody's looking for the fountain of youth. They eventually find it. And they come to Alexander the Great, and they're like, "We got it, we know where it is, but it's strange." And Alexander the Great's like, "What do you mean it's strange?" And they're saying it's like a cliff that just vertically goes up, and then there's a cave in this vertical cliff. So every person can only get to that cave by climbing alone. You can't be accompanied by anyone. So the journey to the fountain of youth was alone. Alexander the Great, he's a conqueror. He doesn't step down from the task. He goes up. He starts climbing solo, and all his men's like, "Yo, this like gravity can literally conquer, you know." But Alexander the Great is so mighty that he goes up. He goes up, solos it out, goes up into the cave. He goes into the cave and he sees the fountain of youth. This very, like at the corner of the cave, imagine a strange fountain, suggesting that there's like other sides to the cave but not accessible. So there's this fountain at the corner of this cave with this very pure water. And Alexander the Great sees this, and of course he's just climbed a cliff, so he's thirsty. And it's like designed that way, strangely, this whole setting. And so he goes and he cups his hands to drink some water from the fountain of youth. And right when he's about to drink it, he hears this voice. And the voice says, "Don't drink it." And he looks around and he doesn't see anybody in the cave. And he's like, "Yo, what's going on?" You know, he's about to drink the water. Then he hears the voice again, "Don't drink it." This time he's so sharp, he pinpoints the voice. He turns around, he sees it's a crow. A crow, a bird, like the bird crow. So the crow's like, "Don't do it." And Alexander the Great's like, "Why?" And the crow's like, "I was a human being, but I drank from this fountain of youth and I became immortal, but I became an immortal crow." And Alexander the Great suddenly realizes the cost of immortality, that the multidimensional evolution is delayed. The singular, let's say, view of the dimension walking towards the multidimensional. For me, my life started from the unknown. My personality, my mind started from the known. and it's been continuing on, and it's been kind of like oscillating in moments of deep sleep where there is no personality and conscious moments, and eventually it's going to come to a moment where it's going to return to the unknown. So the ultimate strategy of human life is get familiar with the known dimensions of the realm. Then after you're comfortable with first the simple dimensions of the known, you'll become comfortable with the complex dimensions of the known. After you're comfortable with the complex dimensions of the known, you find the simple dimensions of the unknown. If you're comfortable with the simple dimensions of the unknown, then you can become comfortable with the complex dimensions of the unknown. The complex dimensions of the unknown, there is no will. There's no personality that functions. So human psychology, even through the route of knowledge, in yoga they called it Raja Yoga, can take the person towards the inconceivable. The word yoga even means to join, and it means to join the individual activity with the cosmic activity. The moment you see them joined, they are inseparable. The moment they're inseparable, it's inconceivable. And then abidance through the will of your own nature with the unknown is the path forth. Or a path where the moment knows before the idea of man can. Anyways, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. And for the realms that relate to the conscious activity of the human being, freedom is a choice. To the realms that relate to the unconscious activity, freedom is an observance. Is to become acquainted with, again, I can't emphasize this enough, with how you are an unknown observer right now. That's how we experience change. Just like the body changes throughout the years, the psychological disposition based on every experience changes. So we're technically treating ourselves as if, yeah, I'm this person, but this person is changing throughout space and time as it's moving in the space-time continuum. So we are more like the future is gonna, their senses of community are gonna feel like rivers, right? But now it's kind of like individual drops, kind of freaking out over evaporation kind of ordeal. And so regardless of the world the attention finds itself in, if the outer realms are inevitable and there's a return to chaos in the outer realms, honor of the inner realms. And as in one narrative, this Japanese narrative, there was this idea of our consciousness is like raging. Our conscious, and for us to truly consciously live, is a rebellion against the cruelty of the meaninglessness of this world. It was like a theme like that. So it's as if to live a conscious life is like the most, I would say, incredible retaliation to the unknown. That means that's what we can do. It's like we are something, and the only thing left is utility. Now, many people, I feel it's not that people have abilities or whatnot. I feel ability is a potential. The potential can be always there. It's just how much authorization there is, how much freedom people feel. If society and civilization is dishonest, the inner realms are on lockdown. If civilization is honest and there's strategies to overcome this, then through honesty, it would be like, we think that we don't know the power of groups of people trusting the advancement of their civilization. That power is like a voltage we have not experienced yet on this planet. We have experienced many movements, many profound ideological movements in our history on this planet, but we have yet to experience a global movement. That means it's as if like a global calling. It's like the person was like, let's say the person went to the shaman back in the day, in a native sense, in a native context, and the person went into the, let's say, was given a sort of unique ayahuasca brew, and there was some sort of vision quest involved. So let's say the person looks at the shaman and it's like, yo, what's my mission here? Like, why am I here right now in front of me? So it's like the individual is wondering about the mission quest of their own eyes. Now imagine if the shaman answered, the mission of your eyes is the mission of the eyes of your species. How would you feel? I would say we can, I would tell you, like, if my attention continued, if I see the species advance, that's a sort of memory, immortal memory, you know? We are a guest in this world until we remember the host, the eyes of the host. And as Plato says, time is the moving image of eternity. Maybe linear time as it relates to our observable universe. It is just one side of a coin where design exists unconditional to change. That means we're on the side of the coin where matter is changing. But imagine we were on the other side of the coin where matter was the same and space was just changing, you know? Even though in certain scientific circles, I mean, it's such a strange, bizarre concept, but in some sense, like in a lot of high schools, they teach that light is nothing can move faster than the speed of light. But it seems to be the case that space, who knew space is running faster than light? And I would say space, it's a very strange, of course it's in a scientific manner, it is shared in a certain context. I mean, it's not like, I can't so casually relay its value, but it's, space, it's like space has to be there before light has a place to go, or even an ability to move. I feel beyond the linguistic simulation, where the psychological theatrics and display of love and hate is found, the presence of energy being a mindset. Like just the notion that an atomic phenomenon has an invisible, observable ability. Now, whether it's local to the brain or it's beyond the brain, René Descartes stuff. to care for the grand evolution. Yeah, thanks for listening. Blessings.